Okay, I think we'll get started because I have quite a long presentation. I might run out of time. So, I am Bernard Rosset. I will be talking about Nginx running with PHP directly from the out of the box and trying to configure it so you can have a simple setup running, very simple stuff, but at least basics are there, and then we'll be free to add some more configuration. A little bit about me before getting started. So I'm pretty new in the field of real world because I graduated 2 years ago. I am deeply interested in high availability challenges, so that's why Nginx is part of my favorite tools to play around with. I'm also a great fan of Redis, and I started to play around with OpenStack, but it's still complicated enough. I've been using Nginx for 3 years now, so it's not much compared to some of you guys. I know some people have been using it since 2008, so I'm definitely not competing with you. On the other hand, I'm using PHP for 10 years now, more than 10 years. So the language is flawed, I know that, but it's still a good scripting language and allows you to do pretty nicely stuff. So presentation will be split in 2 parts. First, some basics. I'd like to give a step-by-step process to set up a single Nginx plus PHP-FPM server. And then the second part will be about more advanced chapters for specific use cases, but it will be much less linear. Okay, so main motivation is that currently in the real world you see a lot of front end of big websites saying that they are using Nginx. Actually, that's not true. They're using Nginx as reverse proxy, and behind is the real production system still running on Apache. So the main goal is to get rid of that useless layer and try to connect the backend, PHP backend, directly with Nginx on the front end. I'll get quickly over that because you already know that, otherwise you wouldn't be here. Apache scales badly and is slow, especially considering dynamic data. So the C10K problem, especially dealing with PHP dynamically generated pages, is a nightmare. So, so that's why Nginx kicks in. And on the PHP side, since version 5.3.3, they included in the core of PHP a fast CGI process manager. So now PHP runs from the very core of it directly on fast CGI, and you don't need an external CGI bundle to connect it to Nginx. So that's very cool. And so let's get started to get rid of Apache. I would like to show you what I will be talking you about. So I will have a little demo running. You saw the VirtualBox window getting set up. I will be using Debian, not Ubuntu server, because Ubuntu server is nonsense. Ubuntu is based on Debian, so I like the original, not the copy. I will be using Nginx FOSS for open source software, latest version available, unless they release the new one since 1 week. PHP-FPM, latest branch, latest version available through package system too, because I like the package system. It allows the system to be easily maintainable and upgraded without the pain of compiling it yourself and stuff like that. For the server content, I won't be using the classical /var/dum because it's not very standard. I don't know if that one is more standard, but I'll use it, so it will be /server/web for content, and specific directory for custom logs. We'll come to that in the advanced chapters. I will quickly go over that too, because that was part of the basic training 2 days ago, and actually I suppose that you are already capable of installing Nginx through official packages. So I will keep it in the slides because I will share the slides with you, but I won't be explaining what you can read here. I suppose you are already knowing everything about it. However, based on the default configuration of Nginx, I like to tweak some stuff because I need to. First, we'll be talking about an Nginx instance on one hand and PHP on the other end. They need to have common rights to be able to read the same files, namely the PHP files. So we need to have a common group. Actually, it will be set at the group level. So Nginx and PHP will both share the same group, which will be --data. By default, Nginx is only configured with the user Nginx, so we need to change it. You have 3 ways of doing it. Actually, more 2, but actually theoretically 3. First is using the user directive in the Nginx configuration file. So instead of user Nginx, you have user Nginx --data. You can add on the system level the Nginx user to the --data group, or you can change the Nginx user primary group. But if you do that, that doesn't work. It's in the bug system of Nginx, but it's not working. Actually, you know what? I think I will just do that and switch over to the real config file because it's much more. Oops, I think I forgot a step. Nope, sorry about that. Okay. And I will be deploying. Yep. Here we go. Oops, no, just. So the config file I am talking about, not this one first, but the main one. So that's the standard config file taken from the installed Nginx for the package, which I modified. So first modification, as I told you, is this one, just adding the group. Not only a user, but also adding a group. I changed the worker process number, which is by default 1. I changed it to auto, so your Nginx will be scaling automatically to your number of cores available in your machine, so it's much more efficient. What I changed to, I activated gzip. You're free to do so, unless you are afraid of breach on SSL. I advise you to disable server tokens. Basically, it allows not to share the version of Nginx you are using to the wild. So people know you are using Nginx but don't know their specific version. By default, it's on, so I suggest you to deactivate it. And then we include the per server configuration file, which is this one. So just put a server name, and we might change the root, all that. But for now, it's just a basic Nginx setup. We just want Nginx running, first step in the process, and we check that Nginx is running. It is. Great. Okay, next step. Installing PHP. Same process almost, unless the repository is different. I'm using .deb because they provide packaged version of PHP. Same process, a source, a key, update, install, pretty straightforward. You see at the bottom the architecture PHP-FPM is using. So the main configuration file is php-fpm.conf. It includes configuration for each module automatically. You have a global php.ini file which sets up the language interpreter. And then you have a pull directory to allow you having several instances of PHP. That will be part of the advanced chapter, so I won't say much about that right now. We'll come to that later. So configuring PHP from the very start, because by default PHP doesn't have a time zone, and if you try to use any time function with setting a time zone, you will get a warning or an error, I don't remember, so it will pollute your logs. So first thing to do, setting the time zone. And of course you need to modify your Nginx setup to serve a default index, we usually name index.php, and add a location to serve PHP files and with specific directives. I will switch to the configuration file again to to show you that in details. So first, a small deployment. Again, here we go. You can see that everything is okay. And no, first time zone. I won't show you the time zone. I know you're already doing great. Actually, I will be showing the Nginx part, so it's that way. So I modified the file again, and you can notice that some stuff changed. First, the root has been changed to the place where I want my content to be stored. I changed the index directive to include the default index.php file. And then I added a special location for serving PHP content. So the very basic you need to serve PHP file is that. It's 3 lines, literally. First, some specific fastCGI parameters, which are described in the fastCGI specifications. Nginx is kindly providing you with a file already setting all those parameters for you. So you just need an include and nothing else. Then you need to set up the script file name. If you don't do that, PHP won't know which file you are trying to interpret and will fail loading it. So you need to pass it on to PHP. And then you just need to connect to a socket you have configured in PHP. By default, it's a Unix socket on the local machine. But if you are using a backend server, which is over the network, of course, you can use a TCP socket. So for the demo, it will be Unix socket. So that's pretty basic. Let's check it works. Yep, it works. That's my index file. Basically PHP info, nothing fancy. Sorry. Okay, but it's not complete yet, because if you are using some CMS, namely CodingNitor, stuff like that, you know that some environment variables need to be set, namely path info. That's a requirement, and it's usually information following the name of your file in the URI. For example, you have myfile.php / something. CodingNitor will need that's following, and that following should be set into path info. By default, you are not setting that variable, so it does not exist, so you need to do something about it. Actually, that's easy. Nginx provides you with, in the fastCGI module, provides you with functions to do that. First one will split actually your URI into 2 parts. First will be the script file name, for example, myfile.php, and the second part will be path info, like I just described it to you. If you know enough about PCRE, you will be able to read what's written. Basically, you have 2 groups, the blue group and the orange-white group. It's basically regular expressions, and yeah, for people who are a bit aware about it, the first question mark in yellow in the blue group actually is to avoid the plus to be greedy. But yeah, if you don't know what I'm talking about, just read about PCRE and learn about regular expressions. And then once you have those 2 variables set, then you need to forward the path info to PHP with calling fastCGI param again. So let's try to set that. So first, loading a special file which tells you that indeed the path info variable is not set. Then changing the configuration file. So once again, little bit of deployment. Here we go. And here's the magic. So here's what I told you about, first one and second one. So what fastCGI split path info does is actually setting the first group into this variable and the second group into this variable, and you just need to pass them on to PHP with fastCGI param. Little something I forgot to mention to you. The configuration of Nginx is made in a way that if you declare any fast CGI parent directive at a certain level, none will be inherited from upper levels. So if you include fast CGI parents at the root, for example, at the root of the server, if you place it somewhere like here, but you are still using fast CGI param here to set some new variables, then what you included here will never be included in your location. That's something which is counterintuitive, but you need to pay attention to it. So be sure to include this file at the same location where you use over fast CGI param. That's a little trick I give you. And now that we have done that, we must check that the path info is set, because as you can see, I have this file I want to execute, and then I want that to be set as path info because it's very important information I need to give my script, because it knows what to do with it. I don't know, but the script does. And if you refresh, then you see that the path info is set properly, and you can check for it in the PHP info, and you see that. So actually you have first variable is the script file name is set to the right file. That's great. And then path info is the rest of the URI set in the right variable too. So all fine. Let's move on. However, with the current setup, there's kind of a problem. I'll show you something. Oops. What's the problem here? Actually, I'm calling a non-existent PHP file, so I am awaiting 404 or some kind of error, but certainly not that. And it doesn't seem to be an Nginx error. It's more like a backend error. So what is PHP trying to do? What is it trying to execute? That's the kind of question that pops in your head normally when you see that kind of stuff. Problem is, it leads to arbitrary code execution. Our setup is not very secure. Actually, what what PHP tries to do is to execute that. And fortunately, with recent versions of PHP, they have whitelisted the extensions that PHP can execute. So that's why you see the access denied. But it's PHP sending back this error. So back in a few versions ago, the security feature was not existing, and that would have produced some output since the image contains a virus and might have executed PHP code. So if a user uploaded that file and entered that URI, you would have been able to execute the code contained in the image. So that's pretty bad. I don't know what you think, but to me it's pretty bad. So we need to do something about it. I first read about this trouble on a blog post at this URI, but the solutions provided there are not right. And actually, I talked to some Nginx guy yesterday about it, and I finally have the right solution about it. So let's start by the wrong solutions. The one I thought was the right one, but actually is not the right one. You may want to try the existence of your file you are trying to send to PHP. So if you can say, all right, I want to check that non-existent.php exists before sending it to PHP. So if it doesn't exist, then Nginx will send a 404 and end of the trouble. It won't ever try to execute the JPEG file. The problem is try-files messes around with the URI, and for internal reasons in Nginx, the fast CGI pathinfo variable gets voided. It's Nginx internals, I don't have the details, I don't care either, but it doesn't work. And you need to use some workaround to correct for that. And I talked with Maxime Delin, one of the developers in Nginx, and he told me that actually a problem comes from the fact that I take things the wrong way. The right solution. So how do you solve this problem? First one is obvious. If you have a temporary directory where you store uploads from users, you should never, ever, ever try to execute what's inside. That's obvious, but it still doesn't solve our problem. There is a configuration stanza in PHP, which is on by default, which tries to actually correct the path info for you. And that comes from the fact that usually the setup with Apache are not done the right way, and PHP is trying to do some kind of job which is not the one it should be. The server, the web server should be responsible for the environment setting, but not PHP. PHP shouldn't try to modify its own environment and make wild guesses about what you wish to do. It should just follow what is sent to it by the web server, and if it doesn't work, just send an error. But it shouldn't try to execute any other file but the one you requested. It shouldn't try to execute the JPEG file while I explicitly asked him to execute the PHP file. So the solution here is to just deactivate this weird behavior of PHP by setting the cgi.fixPathInfo and set it to 0. It's on by default, so just deactivate it. And if you do that, let's do that. Not this one. Next one. Get out of my way. Let's reload the page. Oh, that's better. That's still an error, but it's the one I like. PHP is sending back an error saying no input file specified. Actually, it says that it hasn't found this file, and that's because it doesn't exist. That's cool. That's the kind of error I wish to see. So problem solved. And so yeah, if you try to test for file existence on the web server, then you should do it in another way than using try files. Maxime told me that using try files for that case might not be the right solution. You might use the if directive if you know your way around it, because it's kind of tricky to use. But otherwise, just let the backend decide if it finds the file or not, and maybe try to intercept errors back. But yeah, just do stuff on one side and one side only, not both in the web server and in the PHP backend. Choose one and stick with it. So that's the end of the simple server. I mean, with all that simple stuff, you have a pretty up and running Nginx and PHP running server, and but it's still basic. I mean, we haven't seen a lot about it, and I'd like to address some specific cases right now. First is simple caching, because you know PHP is dynamic, and that's a problem for performance. So you want to serve as much static content as possible. So one way of rendering static content from PHP is just to cache it, because when you serve cache, you serve static. So that's good. Setting cache in FastCGI is pretty straightforward. You just need 3 directives. First one, you know what, I will switch to the configuration file. It will be much simpler to show you. Okay, so I added 3 stuff. First, at the HTTP level, you need to set up the zone and where the cache files will be stored. You need to set a zone, stuff like that. Just read the documentation about it. But you need to specify where the data will be stored for the cache and allocate the memory for it. Then you need to activate the zone for the specific location you want to cache. And then you need to set some validity time for the files, because by default it doesn't cache anything, because it doesn't know how long it should hold the data. So you just need to get used of this directive. And once you have that up and running, let's say your PHP backend suddenly decides to sleep. I mean, it started, they ended. Oh, first I must load the cache now, because the cache is empty by default. So let's go back to our main page. Okay, we load the cache. The page is now in the cache for 10 minutes. Let's kill PHP. First, I show you that it was running. I kill it, and I show you it's actually killed. I'm not cheating here, real demonstration. So now PHP is not live anymore. But if you refresh here, yay, it still works. My page is here, and it will be working for 10 minutes until the cache expires. So that's cool. Pretty cache system is up in 3 lines, so it's pretty straightforward. Very simple. Now the big part. PHP has something called pools. Actually, pool is a separated environment. Each pool has its own separate listener. So you saw I was using a Unix socket to connect to my backend. Actually, each pool has its own socket. It can be either TCP, it can be Unix domain socket, it can be whatever you wish, but you can have several instances of PHP running in the same daemon, actually. So you can, for example, separate your environments. You can have a listener for a specific application, another listener for another application, and you can just separate stuff. And you can do more. You can configure each pool separately. You can set it as a very specific number of workers. You can make a CH root, so you can isolate each pool from each other. And you can go very deep in that. You will inherit the php.ini global file, so all the pool will inherit the same configuration at start. But in each pool, you can override this configuration and make it specific to your environment. If you want to change the log file locations, you can do it. If you want to activate short tags, you can do it, and it won't be applied in other pools, only in your current pool. So that's very, very interesting, very nice. And the added stuff is you can have statistics, metrics about your own pool, and you can have that per pool. So I will be demonstrating that right now. So actually what I did, let me check for it. Yeah, okay, so I added actually the default pool in PHP comes from a file called dumdumdum.conf. And I added another pool configuration file, so you can see both live in this directory. So actually you can have a file per pool, and let's show you what's inside a pool configuration file. So the default one for starters. So you see all that you can configure per pool. I won't go into details. If you want to read about it and read it yourself, you're welcome. I don't have time to do that here. But the major points are here, the listen sockets. So as I said, it can be an IP address, it can be just a port, and it can be a Unix socket. By default, it's a Unix socket. And what's nice, I told you about the status page. So actually, each pool provides you with statistics. So I can show you live. So I have 2 pools, remember, one which is default one, this one. So I will show you the Nginx configuration to be able to display that. But I want to start by explaining you what's in the metrics. So you can see basic metrics, and you can see advanced stuff. So it's real time. Each time you will reload this page, you will see different statistics. So about the last page which has been requested, the time, the number of requests, all kind of nice stuff. And here's my second, no, it's not this one. my second pool. So it's named Woohoo. I lack inspiration. And the same thing is available detailed metrics about this pool. So how to get it running properly? Let's have a big the Nginx configuration for it. So now it got a little bit more complicated. I have a location for status. You know, that's the one I used for the status information about the first worker, the first pool. So that's pretty straightforward. Actually, you just I configured in PHP pool. I configured the location /status to be a specific location. So when my pool will receive that location, it won't even try to search for a file to execute. It will know internally that it's the location for status, for metrics. So if I send that status to the backend through fastCGI parent script file name, then my backend will reply to me with statistics and not a file. And the same applies for the other pool, for which I specified the specific location. And you can see that I am passing content to another listener. It's not the PHP-FPM.sock. It's another socket because it's my other pool. And I do that for both Woo status and for PHP files inside Woohoo. So when I display this web page, I'm actually using the second pool, the one I just configured. No logs, because that's cool to have a server, but it's better to have logs to know what's happening and where does the message go when something goes wrong. By default, if you don't configure any error log directive or anything in PHP, the errors are sent back through the fastCGI pipe. So actually your PHP errors get collected in your Nginx error log file. So that's maybe cool for you, maybe not. But by default, if you don't specify error log, it's in your Nginx error log. Small example of it. Let's open the error log defined for Nginx. Go to the bottom. Just generate some error page, which I didn't make a bookmark. Okay. Oh, no, yeah, of course. This one. If you reload the file, you'll see that there's a new message which just, actually it's not appearing right. Great. Yeah, okay. I must have forgot something. Okay, anyway, you can see that when I was, one of the error I got sooner when I tried to request a non-existing file, and you saw the message sent back by PHP saying that the script couldn't be found. Actually, it's an error that Nginx received through fastCGI, so it's stated here. And you can see the error sent back by PHP. So that's the message coming from PHP. So that's very cool to have it somewhere without having to define an error directive. But yeah. And normally, so it failed because I must have messed up my configuration before preparing this presentation. But normally, yeah, okay, I'll come back to that later, sorry. So if you want to set an error log, I mean, if you want PHP errors to be logged somewhere, you need to activate it. By default, it's empty. I mean, errors like function doesn't exist. I mean, internal errors of the PHP interpreter, not errors from the fastCGI bundle, but errors specific to the PHP language. This kind of error can be redirected to a specific error log file, and you can do it several ways. First one is modifying the global php.in any file, but it will be applied to all your pools. Or you can set it per pool, and you can override the error log directive in each pool to just set a different log file for every different environment you have. You can set it both absolutely or relatively. If you do it relatively, just follow what's written. It will be placed at different locations. So in my opinion, it's safer to always specify locations in the absolute way, because you know for sure where it will end up. Of course, you need to take care about the location you are using, because you don't want to save logs as web content. It's usually not how it should do it. And PHP should of course be able to write to them. So you need to take care about that. It seems easy and obvious, but sometimes you don't think about it. And actually that's maybe where I fucked up. Because by default, actually it's working. It's just me which is not working. By default, if you don't activate this this directive in PHP, the PHP errors, internal PHP errors from the language will be discarded and sent to dev/dev/null. That's maybe why when I triggered my error.php file which contains a PHP error, it didn't pop up in my Nginx error log, because it was not sent back through the pipe. It was just discarded. So actually it's working. I don't know what happened during my tests, but I promise you that it was working before and it's not anymore. So actually you need to activate catch workers output in the pool configuration file to catch the output of PHP workers and make those errors being sent somewhere. And if you want them to be sent back through the fastCGI pipe, you need to activate it. But there are some cases. Also, yeah, I just want to try you some error log being set. So actually what I did in the last deployment was to also set an error. That's why actually. Because I already set the error log directive. I forgot about that, so sorry. I want to show you what I'm talking about. Got the ends, and that's where the magic happens. That's with those directives in the PHP pool configuration file that you can override php.ini directives. So you have different directives. You have PHP value, PHP admin value, PHP flag, PHP admin flag. To know about that, those in detail, just read that's up here, or just go to the PHP documentation to know how to use them. But basically, they're taking a php.ini directive in here, and you can override the value with that. With a special variable pool being the pool name. So in this current case, it's dum. So the file will be php_dum. That's why it didn't pop out in my fastCGI pipe, and it didn't appear in my Nginx error log. It was because it was already redirected somewhere. So I will show you the log file which I created, and it's this one. It's existing, and you can see actually that's the error produced by my error.php file. I'm calling a bzz function which is not there. So the error is now logged in for my pool in this specific file and is not sent back to Nginx in the global common error log. So it allows you to just separate your logs and make them readable. Okay. So sometimes the logs are not enough. You know something is not working because you have a blank page, or even worse, your PHP file is being sent to you as an application object stream. So you know something's wrong, but you don't know where, and you don't know if it comes from. You don't have any specific error message. You don't know what happened. You don't know if it's coming from Nginx or PHP. So you want to do something, which is do a little man in the middle between Nginx and PHP and listen to what they're saying to each other to see if what is sent to PHP is correct and what PHP replies, and see where the problem comes from. I have a small use case for that. Let's say, yeah, not this one. It was not supposed to work actually. Yeah. Okay, never mind. So I don't have a use case, but I have a pre-recorded communication between Nginx and PHP, and I will show you those. So actually, what you want to do to be able to listen to the communication between Nginx and PHP-FPM is first you need to switch over to TCP sockets, because if you are using Unix sockets, you won't be able to tap on the network and listen network layer and listen to what's going on. So you need to first switch to a standard socket, and then use one of the tools, for example, TCP-dump. The commands I just showed you here are maybe not the best ones, but at least they're doing what I wish. So I share them with you. And I'll see if by any luck. Oh, actually I have. Yeah, I have something. I will be able to show you it like it happens. So. Yeah, okay, that's that. Okay. I'm requesting the root, and I got some, oh no, not this one. Yeah, I get access denied. I want to access my script location, which is configured properly because you saw it before. I will show it again, but I get a strange access denied. Why? My file has the rights. I don't know why it's not working. I will show you the configuration I'm using. So actually, I have script locations with the basic PHP setup I explained to you sooner. So the most basic stuff. It should be working, but I have this error. Access denied. So what's going on? Let's say the solution is in the logs actually, but let's say I don't have the logs and I don't know what's going on. I want to listen what's Nginx and PHP-FPM are saying to each other. So first thing is to actually change your configuration to make both parties speak on TCP sockets. So, for example, like that. So I switch over to TCP using the localhost and port 9000. I did the same modifications on PHP side. And then I recorded with TCP-dump. I won't do it right now because I already did it sooner. But basically, you end up with, no, not this one. You end up with that kind of trace. So you can see packet per packet what has been sent from one part to the other. So this is Nginx, and this is PHP. PHP is listening on port 9000. So you can see different packets, and I strip out non-printable characters because I want the HTTP headers. And I think that I spot the error. What PHP is trying to execute is that, and that is not a file. It's not a file at all. It's a directory. So actually, I asked PHP to execute a directory. That's maybe where the problem comes from. So let's go back to the Nginx example, and you see that actually before I had a location with a regular expression matching PHP files, but now I am matching a directory. So there is probably something to do about it. And the solution is there. Actually, you need to add this. In the case of a directory, you need to specify manually to the backends which index file do you want to use. Because Nginx is fine. It took my index.php file, but it didn't send it to the backends because it's a directory. It's not so the PHP was not aware about which file it was supposed to execute. By using fastcgi index directive, you specify that in case there is no, in case you send a directory, you will automatically append index.php at the end of the path you request from PHP. And by doing that, let's suppose that I actually change the setup and listen again over the network, and I will end up with that. That looks better. There is no error actually this time, and you can see that the right file name has been sent, and actually content is being sent back. I didn't show you, but previously it was only an error. You could see that the socket was closing and nothing was being sent back, but an error. And you can check it live. If I now refresh, ooh, yay, my script file is being executed with another boring PHP info content. So actually that's what I just did. It was my use case for showing you the use of listening with TCP/dump. So I solved that problem. So that's a slide less. I think I've explained everything. Yeah. And I will end by talking a little bit about load balancing. I think you already know about it through training sessions and different other presentations talking about it. But you can use load balancing in Nginx, and what's cool is that you can load balance against different PHP backends. The cool thing, I don't know if it has a real purpose, but you can load balance between whatever sockets you have. So you can load balance between several pools on the local machine, and you can also include an upstream which is remote. Of course, the backend is a backend, so your files is executed contextually on each pool, so you made it to check that every backend is configured nicely. So load balancing is pretty straightforward. Upstream block at the HTTP level inside one line of server directive per server. If you are using domain names and the domain names resolves to several IP addresses, you will end up with several servers. Actually, that's what Nginx does. That's pretty cool. And you just need to change fastcgi path not to a specific socket but to the upstream group, and it will be load balancing automatically among servers. And then you have some specific flags, whites. You can do some pretty nice load balancing, but I will be just showing you a very, very basic one. So last deployment. Not Vim, I just want to execute. Yep, here we go. I will show you the file. So here what I did, so as I said to you, I have an upstream block. I have my local pool, one of my local pools, which is a dum-dum-dum. And then I have another server. It's not the same, it's the other machine I started. So it's listening remotely over port 9000. So I have two different machines, the local one and another one. And I will be load balancing very easily from one to the other. And I change the fastcgi path directive to match the upstream group. And can test it. So backend 2, backend. If I refresh normally it works or not. And it doesn't work. But that's great. It worked for 10 days and okay, I must have done something. Oh, I forgot one step actually. I forgot to reset the previous example. Yep. because my actually the first socket, the first server you saw Nginx trying to connect to the Unix socket, the first line actually doesn't exist anymore since my pool is still listening on TCP. I changed that for TCP dump, so I know to reset it. I'm talking about that actually. That was changed to match a TCP socket for me to be able to listen on the network stack. So I just needed to reset it. So now I can deploy the right file again, and this time it will be working. Yeah. So it refresh. It's a very basic load balancing. So each request is a round robin. So next request will be served by the next server in the list. So actually, yeah, backend 2 is served by this machine over here. And that's all. We made it. So if you have questions. Yep.
So this is referring to you setting the workers to auto.
Yep.
So I'm curious about that. Like, I'm running the PHP extension for Aerospike. So in my usual setup, there's going to be an Nginx in front of it, PHP applications running in FPM, and then we have also a client that's like, needs a core regularly because it's doing heartbeats to the server. So in that case, I have, at least several application processes and Nginx. Like, doesn't it make sense to limit the number of cores that we want to give to Nginx, because a request involves all of those, right? Like, otherwise it's going to do a lot of context switching.
For your case, yes, absolutely. But usually, what you do when you have some CPU-intensive backends, the Nginx will be run solely on a specific machine, and then your backend won't be executing on the same machine. I did that for the demonstration, but it's not a real use case scenario when your backend is resource hungry. So in your case, yeah, you need to limit the workers' number. You do it the way you wish, but if you end up with too many connections, remember that you could serve more if you had more workers. But if that conflicts with your backend, maybe a good solution would be to move your backend on a different machine and then let Nginx take all the space it wishes. But it depends on your requirements, actually.
Specifically, the worker setting has to do with how many concurrent connections it can hold.
Actually, each workers only serve a certain amount of connections. Once it's exhausted, the worker won't be processing any more connections. So you can set up Nginx to, I can show you actually. No, not this one, the other. Okay, so that's from the default configuration file. I never wrote that. But by default, the default value of worker connections for Nginx is 512. If you look at the documentations, it's 512. In the default configuration they ship with the Debian package, they upgraded it to 1024. But if you have more than, if your worker receives more connections than this limit, it won't handle them. So you have a limit per worker. So the most worker you have, the best it is. You might set a higher limit if you wish, but I think there are reasons that it's limited. It depends on your setup on your machine. You need to do performance tests about that. But knows that the least workers you have, the least amount of connections you might be able to handle. So you need to make some use case and some tests for your needs. Any other question? Okay, thanks guys. Let's point out that it was my first ever conference, especially in an international scale. So thank you for the support. And if you have time, a few minutes for me, you have the first link, which is a survey. I'd like to get your feedback on this presentation, if you liked it or not, whatever. And the second link is the slides, which are already available online on my website, so you can get them and use them. So thanks.